So welcome everyone to our online meetup. I am Max and I head education and community for Okta Workflows. Today we have a guest, Christian Mayoras, and he'll tell you what he does. But today we have a really cool topic is how to build a dashboard with OIG Google Sheets in Okta Workflows. Before we get started, this event is recorded and then it will be we'll send you a link to a recording tomorrow, but it will be up on Okta's YouTube. If you have questions, you can post them in the chat or the Q&A panel. And I think that's it. So Christian, I will let you, yeah, the stage is yours.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Max. Really excited to be here. Again, my name is Christian Mayoras. I've probably worked with some of you. I know some of you, and I've worked with many of you as well. I am what's called a Principal Product Acceleration Specialist. What that essentially means is I have a really, really cool job that I get to work on the product team, but I get to work with existing and new features related to Okta Identity Governance. Those features allow me to build tools and showcase the way the product works, but also get to work with the field, work with partners, work with sales, everybody. So it's a really cool opportunity. What I'd like to do today is really showcase Okta Identity Governance and ways to be able to leverage things such as workflows to be able to build a dashboard. And I'm going to showcase a couple different things. Today, the focus is going to be on Google Sheets, but I will talk about the Excel version, which I've also uploaded. By the way, I've uploaded both versions, the Google Sheet and the Excel version, in the dev forums, so you can download those free of charge. I spent a lot of time building them, and hopefully you'll get some good use out of it. So let me start sharing my screen.
Yeah, and we put a link. You should have a resources link in Zoom. And I think if you open it, it will show you a link to download those templates. But actually, I'm going to put them in chat as well.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So this is kind of an informal type meeting. So if you have questions, Max said he'll alert me if there's questions that are coming in. I may be looking at my other screen in some cases when I'm looking at the page where I'm going through, but just keep in mind, I'll keep looking back. So where I'd like to start first is just making sure everybody's on the same page when it comes to the Okta APIs. It's very, very important. A lot of the APIs we've recently gone GA, so they're available now under developer.okta.com, as you can see on the page. What I'm going to do is just showcase how to get to them and show how to actually use the pages, because they're very dynamic in nature. You really need to understand that to be able to help you build some of these things, especially in workflows. All right. So if I go to the API docs, you're going to notice here at the very bottom, the Okta Identity Governance tab. Once you pull that up, you're going to see all the different APIs. What I like to do and what I like to highlight in this page, and some people realize this and I didn't at first, is that anytime on this page you see things such as a caret, going left or right or up or down, you can click on those and it will allow you to expand and contract content. So keep in mind that that is available there. You'll also see areas in which you may have a drop down in the middle of the page, and I'll show you that. For example, in the grants API, if I'm going to create a grant request, this here, I have the option to pick and choose those. And keep in mind when you do.
Christian, sorry,
Yeah.
could you make the screen a little bit bigger?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Let's try that again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. So again, on this API page, it's really important to understand that these are dynamic in nature. So the contents may be expanded if you need to look at them. Again, in some situations, when you also make these changes, for example, this is the create a grant request API. If I say I want to do a bundle, not only does the content change, you also see the updates. You can also see that here in the pages where you see these darker sections. There are some APIs that will have multiple options available. For example, here, granting a bundle to a principal, bundle with an expiration date, a policy, entitlements, and so on. You have the ability to be able to do this. So keep that in mind when you look at all the different related APIs related to Okta Identity Governance. You're going to see these areas where you can expand. A great use case here also, you'll see if you go out to workflows and there's templates out there now, if you search for the word campaigns, you're going to see campaigns similar to all the ones that are visible here. So keep that in mind. one of the things that I'm trying to do is make sure that we have templates available that match a lot of these use cases. So you could either go to templates or go here to be able to get those. Just wanted to highlight those APIs. So let's jump into the dashboard. Now, where the dashboard came from, just give you a little background. I've been doing the governance almost a little over 2 years here at Okta, but I've been at Okta a little over 11. So having the ability, and we get the requests from customers. So I want to highlight, safe harbor too as well. If I talk about any roadmap type items like this, we are looking to add a dashboard type effect in the product. So it is something that's on the roadmap at some point. I don't have a date or time at this point, but in lieu of that, what I like to try to describe is workflows is a great tool to be able to extend what we do out of the box with Okta Identity Governance. What that means is I can build a governance practice using Okta Identity Governance to create access requests. V1, V2, we have both out there. Also create access certification campaigns. I can enjoy entitlements as well as reporting on all those things, right? That all exists in Okta now. But if I want to take some of those features that we do out of the box and extend them, add additional features, Workflows is a great tool for this. And so where this dashboard effect started was customers asking for certain things, but then I'm also supporting our Okta and Okta implementation of governance internally. And so there has been some requests to build some reporting. And so what I decided to do is we have this great tool for work called Workflows that has all these capabilities. There are some cards that support things like Google Sheets and Excel, but what I realized is if I wanted to build something very dynamic, I had to kind of take this to the next level. And so my first approach was, and this is 7th-generation versions of this, but my first approach was taking the information that we have available inside of Okta Identity Governance and make this visible through a report. So this report, I'm not sure if they're using this exact version just yet. The previous version had some graphs in it as well, but they basically have it scheduled to run every Monday, and it pulls in the details from last Monday through Sunday of any requests come in, so we have visibility. What I tried to do is take the things that I thought were important and shed those in a dashboard. I'm leveraging text fields. I'm leveraging what we call spark lines. You can see these formulas. This was all done dynamically with the workflows. And again, in the downloads, you can get to those 2 different examples. I will also compare and contrast what I've learned between Google as well as Excel in this as well. So what I at a high level, the way I approach this is I build it very modular in the sense that I first go through, create the Google Sheet, create the sheet with tabs. You'll notice I'm using an out-of-the-box card for that. But then as I'm doing customized things like setting fonts or setting text, updating formulas, creating charts, formulas are also spark lines, keep in mind. I'm merging cells so I have bigger areas. All those types of functions are done with the custom API connection for Google Sheets. And I'm doing the same thing with Excel, meaning that we don't have a card per se to do that, but because we have the custom API action card, I could take advantage of what's already there to just make those API calls. And so what I'm going to get into and show you is how I did that, how I built them, but I'm going to you'll have this template that'll give you a jump start for you to be able to just jump in and do it. This first version that I did of this report took me I'd say about over 30 hours to build. Now, part of that was learning the Google Sheets API, understanding some of the nuances. For example, sending formulas across, you sometimes have to escape certain values, otherwise the formula won't work. The charting, I will say also compare and contrast charting. The charting in Google Sheets is way more complex than it is in Excel. The Excel version is way more simpler, but Excel doesn't support things such as spark lines that you see here. So you will, depending on your audience, depending on who you are as a customer, what products you have, if you're a partner and you're looking to build this for a customer, depending on what they have, if you're just somebody that wants to try to play with this, you're going to have both versions to play with and see how to take advantage of both. But again, what I'm trying to do is give you something that you can jumpstart your campaign, or excuse me, your dashboard using the APIs that exist for Okta Identity Governance. Now, does that mean Could you use it for anything? Of course you could. You could use these same techniques to be able to pull any data around Okta related to a list of users. I mean, we do have reports out of the box, but what I'm getting at is if you want to build some sort of dashboard effect where you're doing this and you're pulling this data and you're presenting it to, say, a third party, somebody that doesn't have administrative access to Okta where they can't get the report, this is a great function, a great tool to be able to do that. Now, what I've done in this one here, you'll notice is I'm pulling in a list of all my access requests. This is the request API to list all requests. And then pulling in all the information related to who approved it. I'm using things such as list maps and lists for each to be able to grab that data, collab, and pull it all together into a list, and then push that data using the Google Sheet API to be able to write it. So it's very, very complex at first, but once you get the hang of it, the only thing that I'm not doing in the examples that I shared with everybody on the template page is I limited the data to just say 200 records of requests or campaign details. This version here is one that I built again internally, which is using things like pagination. So little things like that you'd probably have to add yourself, but building that customization, you can do that, right? I'm writing a list of all the applications that are in my test instance. If any of you are familiar with V2 over access requests, we call them conditions. So even here, I thought a very useful charting would be to determine, have I deployed a list of applications where maybe somebody removed a group or somebody removed a bundle, and that would cause an invalid condition to show up. So I'm using that to be able to highlight issues that might have been created inadvertently by administrators as well. And then,
Hey, Christian, sorry. Do you mind if I interrupt you? There's one question I'm going to click if you want to, I'm going
sure.
to read it. The question is, who's using OIG actively in the public sector?
So great question. Right now, we are not approved. Well, public sector, PubSec. I'd have to go. I don't know. I don't know exact all of them, all the customers that are using it. I know you could probably go through your sales rep to figure out if we have some references. We do have some. I just don't, off the top of my head, I don't know. What I was going to say is later on this year, targeted for OIG, we're also going to be, we're looking for a FedRAMP compliancy. So we're going to be available in the FedRAMP side as well. So on the like the schools or colleges, I think we do have some customers, but off the top of my head, I'm not involved with every single deal anymore, so I don't know them. But we could if you go through your rep, you could probably find out who and if they're referenceable. That is great
All right,
question.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, this dashboard that I built here is really more about the access request and focusing on just the request. I am going to be building one for internally for Okta and Okta to do this for our certification campaigns as well. So I am looking to do that. I'm going to now jump to the Google Sheet version. That is what you will see when you do the example that's in the template. So what I'm doing here is I'm combining two out of the three or so products in Okta Identity Governance. I'm combining campaigns and I'm combining access requests all in this. Now, this is a demo environment, so what you're seeing here obviously is just demo data, but you get the idea that I can build these Spark lines fairly easy, pull in the text, set the fonts, do the shapes, put things wherever I want, and then build a chart in the end. In this case, I'm pulling a list of, using the API to pull a list of campaign data. I'm pulling the list of request data. And then I'm also using the processing where I'm building a formula and pulling in all those values from those other sheets. Those values, for example, those values here are what are being referenced in this chart. Fairly simple. Again, I'm going to get into the workflow and showcase it a little more, but I just want you to remember that all these little things in here, even down to building this border, you'll notice there's double on the bottom, it's green, it's red on top, there's dashed and dotted. I put all those examples in there, so therefore you had a working example to be able to figure out what you wanted to do. There's a lot of different variations. Lastly, before I get into the actual workflow itself and kind of showcase how I built this out, I also offered up the Excel version. Now, depending on if you have Excel or Google, again, I went back to the graphing. The graphing inside of Google, for example, over here, this was difficult. I leveraged ChatGPT for a lot of stuff, but I will warn you that the Google Sheets API, in some cases, is a little more cryptic. I can't find great examples. Even ChatGPT has some incorrect examples. So keep that in mind. So there was a lot of trial and tribulation trying to get some of these to work. But There's a lot of great resources you can find of the Sheets API works. My biggest challenge in this is building these charts, but these Spark lines are extremely simple to do. Now, contrast to that, you'll notice that the graphs look a little more robust in Excel. These graphs are really easy to do. And I can even get to a point where I can showcase that as well. I created what I like to do in these flows is where if I am doing something repeatedly over and over, for example, when I'm doing a Google Sheet, in order to be able to write data to it or make a change to it, I have to pull the sheet ID. So I've created utility flows that I reuse. Well, in Excel, in the Excel version, I also created utility flows to be able to create graphs. And all I do is supply the coordinates and the range in which I want to call where I want to pull the data from, as well as the title, and it automatically creates these on the fly. It's extremely simple. So I think Excel has some major advantages there. I also say, in my experience, I tend to run into some issues with the Excel API sometimes. It seems to be on the Microsoft side where I might hit gateway errors. Typically, even trying to create an Excel sheet dynamically with an API, I will get some, it'll balk now and then. I just retry and it seems to work fine. So you may run into that as well. On the Google Sheet side, I have very good throughput. I don't have any issues there. I very rarely have had any issues. I will say that I have heard some customers say that they sometimes hit a rate limit with Google. I've never run into that. I don't know if that's just the way Okta's built or not, and the way our agreement is with that, but keep that in mind. Again, I want to compare and contrast so you get an idea where things worked well and maybe didn't work well. All right.
Hey, Chris, there is a follow-up to
Yeah.
the answer that you provided. So it says, thanks. So what compliance OIG has to go through for public sector? Is it HIPAA, GDPR, or SOX?
So right now, it's not what Okta has to go through. So where I'm going with right now, Okta is available in all of our cells that are non-FedRAMP or non-compliance, meaning non-HIPAA or FedRAMP. We offer OIG there now. So if a customer is in a compliance cell, I think it's 5 or 10, they would have to wait until Okta Identity Governance was made available, which is being targeted later this year. So any other location outside of those compliance cells, you can run OIG to be able to help with satisfying things like Sarbanes-Oxley, SOX, GDPR, and others. So that's basically it. Does that help?
We'll see. It's a attendee. I don't know their name, but hopefully, yeah. Let us know in the chat if this helps. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they said yes. But there's another question. Also,
Yeah.
let me click here, answer live. Will there be out-of-the-box connector in workloads for all the OIG API endpoints?
Great question. So when we were waiting for the APIs to go GA. So once they went GA, there is an effort underway. I don't have timeframes on those. There's an effort underway to, based upon priority, we're thinking about things like entitlements, campaigns, and so on. There is a effort by the workflow team to be able to create those connectors. So yes, we're underway to be able to build those. Keep in mind too, one of the things right now if you go out there and search for campaign, there's 37 templates for campaigns. I just submitted about 2 weeks ago, updated 18 templates to build conditions, meaning all the different variations of a access request v2 version. So you'll have those available hopefully soon as well. Even trying to see if we can make these templatized, meaning that we have support for them as well, versus just handing them out, but you do have access to them now. So great questions.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump over into the flows. Now, before I get into, I'm going to maximize this and make sure the screen's a little bigger. You are going to see some naming. You're going to see some weird things. The way I do some naming. The reason for this ohm symbol was nothing more than to make it stand out in my folder. Put it at the very bottom of my folder. So I was using special characters. That's why you're seeing that in the name. Has no other relevance. It's more about sorting. I'm also I also spend a lot of time organizing my flows, and maybe in the future we might have a webinar or a meetup to talk about that as well. But in each of the flows, the Google Sheet dashboard for OIG, this one's 20 flows, and you're going to see that in some cases you're going to see me list it as a utility. So again, right here, you're going to see where this utility is allow me, in order to write to a Google Sheet, I need to be able to figure out what the Google Sheet ID is. And so what that's referring to is when I create a Google Doc and I create a Google Sheet, excuse me, and then I have tabs, each one of those tabs has a sheet ID. So I need to be able to send over, say, for example, what's the Google Sheet ID? What is the sheet name? And it will return me the ID. And then I can use that over and over in other flows. And you'll see how I lay that out. And that's how I'm doing it. But you'll see other things. Find Google Sheet ID, read each sheet. These two are actually linked together. They work together, but I use that a lot in a lot of my flows. And you'll see that as you walk through. What I tend to do too, I tend to make everything because you can call access or you can call workflows from access request. They have to be delegated flows. I've started creating most of my flows as helper flows, meaning that I could always call them or I could manually start them. So a lot of times what I'll do, sometimes if you have so many flows, you don't remember which one is the one that starts everything. So I usually just put a start here, and that's why you're seeing that way. You could make it a delegated flow and kick it off through an admin delegated flow or through an access request. That's your choice. Feel free to change. So the other thing that I do, and I found this to be very, very useful, is making sure I'm documenting as I'm building these flows. Because when I first built this flow, over those 30 some hours, it might have, when you went and looked at it afterwards, it just looked like a hodgepodge. So I realized later on that as I build these flows, I make sure I'm documenting them. So each of those steps are going to talk through what am I doing in these steps. So in the way I've learned to build these as well is because I'm doing things like creating fonts, updating text, creating Spark lines, updating formulas, creating charts. I'm doing those all individually. So the way I built both of these flows is it's very linear at the top level. So if I go to a flowchart view, you're going to see that this just seems to go on and go on. And you'll notice that it's call flow, comment, call flow, comment, call flow. I do that over and over again because for you as somebody reading this, you'll be able to see that, oh, I'm creating the spreadsheet here. Oh, I'm calling this flow to pull the sheet name, the tab supplied. Here's the sheet ID. Calling this flow to set up a border. And I continue that on through everything. So in this case, what I did in the Google Sheet, I created two separate sets of borders. So you had examples of both, and I'll pop into some of those. The other thing you're going to start to see is you're going to start to see that I standardized the inputs across all the subflows. And in some cases, those same inputs are providing output. So my input here is a Google Sheet and the name of the sheet, but my output, you'll see in some cases will be like the updated sheet ID. And I'll show you that and when we do that. So in this case, I did borders. I set the column sizes. So if we go back to this Google Sheet, you're going to see that column A is one size, E is a different size, I is a different size. So I'm leveraging these different flows to be able to do things like that. I do the same things with the rows, showcasing here how to merge cells and set border colors. I will tell you, based upon my experience as well, Excel seems to be a little more finicky. When you do border colors or you do background colors, excuse me, set the farthest background color first and overlay the other ones on top. You do it the other way around, you just end up, you overwrite what you did previously. Same with things like merging cells. If you merge a cell after you've colored it, sometimes it turns it back to the no color. So you'll see the order in which I do things in Excel may be a little different than Google, but it's because of the behavior that the API works and how the sheets work. All right, so let me keep going on this, kind of showcasing these flows. So you see setting the row size, merging the cells. And again, I'm going to jump into a couple of these and show you more and more. Updating the dashboard text. Now this is a cool one. I'm going to jump right into this one. And again, in here, while that's coming up, having these like this does a couple different things. It allows for a standard look and feel to be able to troubleshoot. If I'm building something, I know where to go look, but it also provides continuity when I troubleshoot in the subflow. So for example, if I get into the subflow, you're going to see that not only do I provide these inputs, I document these inputs, but if I look at execution history, say I'm doing a utility where I need to figure out the ID of the dashboard or ID of the campaign sheet, I can go back here because I'm passing these names across. I can also figure out through all these troubleshooting which flow that I do what. So it allows me to troubleshoot those as well. Now, in this use case here where I'm updating text, I'm providing you if you haven't used these object constructs, I would also recommend, this is a huge thing. And I think it's really important to get a handle of it because it's way more powerful to be able to build. I built out a lot of these originally with just compose cards. So I was building the JSON, but that gets very hard to troubleshoot and fix when you do mass updates. So building them like this, where you're using these object constructs and building the inputs to the JSON API is a lot easier to manage in the long run. And so here, what I'm doing is updating certain rows with certain text, and you're going to notice that there's a lot of repeat, but we get down to the very end. I'm essentially building all these constructs together. Each one of these is a different row update, but when I look at the history and I grab like the latest one that I ran, and we go to the very end, the API call, I'm concatenating them all together. Each one of these is setting up things like values that exist in the text that's supposed to be there. So this is really how the Google Sheets API works. All right, any questions? We good, Max?
No questions so far, yeah.
Okay, great. So again, each one of these is going to give you an example that you can dig into and start to make adjustments with. I recommend getting in here and figure out which ones make the most sense. When you get into the request section or the campaigns, you'll notice in here, again, I said as pulling the APIs from Google, or I'm sorry, with the APIs from OIG, you're going to notice I cap the API to only pull in 2 records. I also said, just give me the last 6 months worth of data. So in here, you can see where I'm building, say, for example, the headers that exist in the Google Sheet. And then as I scroll down a little more, you're going to see this is how I'm writing to the Google Sheet. This is about the only time I'm really using a compose card in here. Otherwise, I'm using the constructs. So this is updating the headers. So I'm going to go to actually, instead of the headers, I got the headers for the campaign. I'm going to get where we're pulling in the actual data with the APIs. So keep going. You'll see a lot of individual things I've done. Resize columns, set the formulas, find the Google Sheet, create the dashboard. Actually, where is it? Get campaign data. So let's do this one. Again, with the get request or the get campaign data, what I essentially did in here is shortcut it. I didn't pull in, I have so much data, there's a lot. I just said, give me the last 6 months and only pull 200 in. So you see, I'm putting the limit of 200. So I'm only getting 200 records back from the API. And I'm using a date function to say, give me only thing that was created greater than 6 months ago. So I'm limiting the data. So when you get into your play, you'll have to adjust that to pull in more of your details and more of your data. It's just the way the API works. So don't forget developer.okta.com for those things to make sure you're hitting those pieces to grab that data. And here I'm actually pulling the data, pulling some of the remains, and then I'm writing it back to the Google Sheet. So again, I'm not going to go through every single card, every single one, but these will give you a great example of how to go build this very quickly. You have a good running start. I will show you this last piece of the charting. As mentioned in Google Sheets, I'm not saying there's not a better way. There's probably a better way. I spent probably a good 8-10 hours converting the compose card that I originally used for a chart over to the object construct. This is a very complicated use case on the end. It was very complicated. If somebody figures out a better way, please share it with me because it was painful to do. You'll notice in the end that this is a lot of object constructs. I had to reconstruct the whole JSON body and supply it. Things like this are supplying the colors. These are different color options that exist for the bars. You'll notice that in this case, they rotate. So it's the dark blue, lighter, dark blue, lighter. That's the way I'm using them. The end result is if I go to the actual execution history of creating this chart, I'll showcase what this looks like. This is quite ugly. So as we get into request, add chart. The issue that I find is it's a little cryptic to understand like the series data versus the legend data and how to get it in there and how to make the adjustment. So again, use this as a reference point to be able to kind of determine how you can build one a little easier. This one just can be very difficult. So I hope it's enough to get you started. It took a while to build this one, the charting itself. All right. I know this was mostly Google Sheets. We said about 30 minutes max. I still have a few more minutes.
Yeah, go for it.
Great. All right. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to showcase the Excel one just a brief minute, just to make sure everyone's on the same page for that one. Let me find this real quick. This is in my workshop other folder, the Excel version. In Excel, I did the same kind of approach. This one has 4 more flows, but again, you're going to see that same concept where I'm doing a utility. For example, in Excel, it's very easy to just resize columns using a flow. So I use this utility flow. If I pop into this flow, you're going to see that when I execute, you're going to see, for example, that's the sheet name, processing. But if I go down, you're going to see active campaigns. You're going to see campaigns, request. So I'm using this over and over again. So it's very useful to be able to build these flows in such a way that you can reuse them. The other thing that I'll give you as a hint that I find very useful in the workflows is I build these as independent, kind of somewhat independent flows. I don't build these for a business, meaning it's more me playing around and doing things. But I think from a business perspective, it may be a good practice to also maybe have a section in your workflows that are repeatable utility flows that can be used across any of your flows for the business, right? So I need to pull in users and maybe transform something with the user account. I would do, I would create a utility for that. And then anybody that builds a workflow can share those utilities. It's just something that just dawned on me at the top of my head. I will show high level this Excel one as well. Again, I found one other thing that was very, I haven't figured out because I just built this last weekend. Unfortunately, I didn't get through everything. This one, when we get into this flow, you're going to notice it's a little longer. It's a little longer. And a lot of these I'm repeating a lot of these flows. This section here that I'm going to show you is a repeat of just setting a formula in a cell. I struggled with both ChatGPT and the web to figure out a way to be able to set the range and set it with one call. So I end up having to make individual calls. So it's probably not ideal. Probably somebody will find a better way. Hopefully I will too. I'm going to be looking for it. But right now, in order to get it done for this presentation, I was kind of stuck there. But you're going to notice the same approach, creating the spreadsheet. There is some different nuances between the cards and workflows. Like I can create an Excel sheet. I can't create the tabs in it. In Google, I can. So some nuances, but this one here is a utility to create the tabs. I'm passing dashboard. I'm passing campaigns to it, so on and so forth, all the way down. You're going to see I'm doing all these. Even this one, this one's a utility to delete a sheet. So when you create via API, an Excel sheet, it creates a sheet 1 by default. So I needed to delete that. I couldn't find a way to do it otherwise. But as you keep going down, you're going to notice, again, the same process. So this will give you the same example. Creating borders, merging cells, column size, row size, update background, update text, update font size. Here's where I start to get the request, get the campaigns, get active campaigns, because in this example on Excel, I had 3 different charts. Here's where I was talking about where I'm calling the flow over and over again to set a formula. I wasn't able to figure out the range, the way to do it via range and send it through one list through a JSON body yet. I just didn't have time. So I ended up having just to repeat this over and over again. But because of the way I built that, again, it's easy to follow and you'll be able to figure out what I'm doing with each of those cards. And you'll notice there's a lot of them here because there's a lot of formulas. So let me scroll all the way down. Here's the utility to autofit. Again, super simple. You just call it this utility, and it's actually, when we get to the flow itself, it's a very short workflow. I'll showcase it real quick because it's kind of neat. The other thing you'll learn in Google Sheets and Excel is the formatting. Either supplying the Google Sheet ID or the Excel Sheet ID. Some cases, there's usually 2 variations of the API. One where it is I can supply the sheet ID that's generated when you create it, or I can supply the sheet name. You'll see different variations of the API. As you can see here, this is really just 2 cards where I'm just saying, give me the sheet name. I'm getting the worksheet. That's the worksheet name. And I'm saying autofit. And I run the API. Boom, it's done. It's very simple. A little more different versions, like Google is a little more, but it's fairly simple to build these and use these. Last one is this right here is, again, a utility. All I need to supply is the Excel spreadsheet ID, the dashboard or the tab name, what source data, what range of the source data am I using, the coordinates, and then the title. The end result of that will showcase that I create this this chart, this chart, and this chart based upon those coordinates. So it's extremely easy to do once you figure that out. Um, Again, I think once you get the data in there and you can start massaging the data using formulas, building these charts are going to be, they'll fly. They're so quick with Excel. Like I said, Google's a little more complicated when it comes to the charting. Hopefully I can figure out a better way to get around it. You also, I think the options in Google, there's probably about 8 different versions of charts that you can take advantage of, like pie charts, stack charts, column, bar charts, line charts. You can do those. You can also in Google, you can also, instead of doing spark lines, you could also do lines where they're doing more of a line graph across those. So there's a lot of options when it comes to these in Google Sheets API. Again, this is a little more complicated. Over here, there's no spark lines, so you're via API. Now, one other thing to think about is if you did want to do spark lines in Excel, the approach that you would take is in the very beginning of the workflows, instead of actually creating the campaign sheet, what you'd use is most likely use the API to take a pre-built campaign dashboard template and copy it and then update it with the data. And that would allow you to be able to use spark lines dynamically. You just have to use a template. Again, the whole approach here is you don't want to have this protected behind, say, behind the admin login. So I wanted to make this so I could dump this out to a shared drive within Google or Excel or OneDrive. So then all the parties that need access to it can gain access to it dynamically, on a scheduled basis. You can run them one off, you can schedule them, you can have it called from an access request. You could also say, my compliance team wants to be able to look at a dashboard. You could have that access request call a group, which or adds a user to a group, which then spawns a workflow to be able to go call this workflow to go run this and send it to them. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this. And I hope this has been helpful. I think we're getting close to time, right, Max?
Yeah, yeah, no, this is very, very good. And I love your usage of the notes card. It makes it yeah straightforward when someone opens the flow. Um, but also you mentioned in the beginning, yeah, we'll have a session about organizing flows into folders, and so I think that's also a good topic because I see a question like that a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so there, I'm gonna click here. There is one more question, and I know I have a answer to the first half of it, but the question is, I need access to workflows and OIG on a developer tenant. So I know with workflows, it's not available on a developer tenant today. But what about OIG?
It yes, it can be. Yes. It can
It
be
can
set up.
or
It can.
can? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right,
They're basically SKUs. Somebody would just have to go in and enable the SKUs. We
got
also
it,
have time-bound SKUs, so you can enable and say they're good for 30 days if somebody wants to do that.
got it.
Yeah. What I'd recommend is if you are a customer and you have preview, that's the ideal situation. It is, I don't want to say it's that much slower, but it's a little slower because it's preview in nature. That's typically where I do most of my work.
Yeah, but I think, but does it also apply to a developer tenant, an actual developer tenant,
Not
not
by
preview?
default. Not by default. You wouldn't
Oh,
get it.
no, but okay, all right.
You'd have to have somebody enable it for them.
Got it. So yeah, but for workloads, it is not available on a developer tenant.
Right.
Now, so an option if you want to try this is so there is a trial you can sign up for Okta, right? And you get five flows. And do you get also access to OIG as part of the trial? Is that?
I think you'd have to have it enabled for there too. I
Oh,
don't
I
think it's
see.
enabled by
Okay.
default.
All right.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, but
But
I would work with your rep to figure out the best alternative. There's definitely a path we could figure out something.
got it. Got it. But yeah, but for workloads, again, if you want to give it a try, then sign up for the trial. You get 5 flows. It is a 30-day trial, but yeah, and today is just not available on the developer tenant. Now there is another. Um, Let me see here. I'm gonna click. If we prefer partner, if we are a partner, do we get access to more than 30 days? Um, I don't know. Is that something, do you know an answer or should they
Oh,
contact?
oh. So I would work through the partner team. That's going to be more their decision. When I said the 30 days, essentially we can set a time limit on how long somebody has a feature like OIG enabled. You can say, I need it enabled for whatever. And that you work with your partner team. They can help you get that done for
Got
sure.
it. All right.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to quickly go to chat because there's a question for you in the chat.
Let's go.
So it says, great work, Christian. Did you consider manually creating the report in Excel or Sheets and then just updating the underlying data using workflows instead of dynamically creating the documents each run?
Yeah, yeah. So I would consider, and that was the last thing I just kind of mentioned. What I found is in Excel, for example, I'm unable to do the spark line, but if I wanted to include it, you'll also find options, and it's a great example. Now you got me thinking about it. Maybe I'm going to do that next for both of these and update it so it will support that because that's a great use case. Because um, doing things like gauge charts, they're not available in the API. I can't, like a gauge where it says it's 0 to 100% or a speed or whatever. You can't do those with the API. So there are going to be restrictions, but those restrictions will only apply to the API and creating it. So if you create a template ahead of time and just copy the template, you'll have all those underlying pieces in place. And then you're right. It'd be so much quicker to be able to go and just update it. What I was doing here was raw on purpose. Part of it was because I had somebody tell me, I don't think it's possible. And I'm like, well, okay, when you say it's not possible, I'm going to go figure it out. And so that's where I started with this is I really wanted to showcase that the power of not only workflows, but taking the information we have on governance and making that visible also through there.
Cool, cool. All right, let me quickly go into chat. There's another question. Oh, it says, man, this workflow is awesome. Any tips on enabling it, as in mass update the connectors all at once and enable the workflows? Um,
That's
you,
more of a workflow generic. I think what I've learned, you're right, is go set up that Google connection or Excel connection before you import it. And I think that makes it a little easier, but it does require you to, I think, go to each card.
yeah, I think you have to do it in every flow. Yeah,
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
yeah,
Another thing I will say, and I'll talk about this maybe if we do another meetup on the organization too, is what I've found in when you build something like this, I end up having variations or versions of each one. And during the build process, I will tell you, I'll even show you here. Um, in my build process, what I will do is I will put the version in the beginning of the flow name. The reason for that is when you copy flows, so say I make a copy and I move it to another folder, the old linkage to the old subflow is still contained. So if I create a new flow, say for example, right now, these are version 3.1.5. If I created, or it's actually version 5, but disregard that. If I created a new one and this was linked to this, when I make a copy, I'll still see it linked to v3.1, but I'm in a new version. So it helps me identify because sometimes you'll make copies of things and then you'll go to troubleshoot and go, why is this not working? And then you realize it's pointing to a folder that you used 6 months ago, and you made a change. So things like that also help, especially when you get into these complex use cases where over and over you're having to trace all these pieces. Another thing that I showed Max, but we'll talk about it in a future, is I also document these using things like Lucid Chart, and I document them in such a way that I can easily troubleshoot them as well. So I've learned sometimes you don't do it the first time when you build it, but now when I build them, I'm building them out in a Lucid Chart to be able to keep track of everything. And you could take that and give that to somebody like yourselves, and you could use it and you would understand it better. So hopefully, the way I built these out will be easier for you to understand each of the functions and how to build them yourself.
cool. All right, let's take one more question. There's one I'm going to click. So, if we're sending Okta system syslog data to a SIEM, that's security, information, and event management, would the various events go give similar data rather than having to query the campaign or request API?
No,
Um,
great question.
Almost as an example, almost recreate this in a SIEM dashboard.
Yeah, unfortunately, no. But because the APIs do exist, what I've built in other workflows is um, I'll try to finalize that workflow and share it on the template, the page where I shared these two. A way to grab the data and push it out to like a BI tool instead of a SIM. So the reason why you're not seeing this level of information in the SIM tool is because you may have some more proprietary data in there. So if I running a campaign on 100,000 different events and sharing all that in an event would just clog that the system log. So we chose in that level of detail related to access certifications, access campaigns, entitlements, grants, those types of things. You'll see some of it, like for example, when a user's granted an entitlement or granted a group, you'll see that event in there. It'll talk about who requested it, who granted it, what they get, but it doesn't get into all that nitty-gritty detail. That's really part of the governance reporting and governance stuff. And those, any details related to that, also keep this in mind, is that only kept for, it's kept for 3 years. Governance data is 3, but anything else is 90 days unless you're going to a SIM tool. So that's part of it as well. Not everyone uses SIM tools.
Right, cool. Thank you. There is a one more sort of question comment. Thanks, Christian and Max. This session was extremely helpful. Thank you. We're glad this is a useful session. Is there a link that has upcoming Okta workflows similar to these we can subscribe to? So we have a page
You want me to
like
stop
this
sharing,
one.
Max? Here, let me stop sharing. You can share if you want.
Yeah, I shared the link, but it's just a page that has our upcoming events. And then again, the events also a recording will be on YouTube sometime tomorrow. And again, you'll get a message with the link to YouTube and any other resources that sort of we shared during this meetup.
And I just shared the product hub page for Okta Identity Governance. So if you're looking for the latest updates on that, again, think about this dashboard effect. I could do this for monitoring entitlements. I could do this for other functions that exist. I mean, there's a lot of data manipulation you can do to be able to showcase this data and what means the most to you guys. So a lot of options.
Yeah, and I see another question. Can we please get a recording and the flows? So yeah, so the flows, you can get the flows, right now, and then share this link. It's on the community forum, and again, the recording will be available tomorrow, and you'll get a message from Zoom that telling you that the recording is available. Also on the forum where you'll find the templates. So it's a community forum, and the category is for community people to share flows. So if you have any flows that you like to share, you can upload them and just make them available for other folks. You can add a short, description or just what it does, and yeah, share what you build, and then other folks can, try them and use them. So
Yeah, when I was a sales engineer at Okta, prior to this position, somebody would, the toughest question I would always get was somebody'd say, well, what can you do with workflows? And I'd always struggle with it because it's hard to put your arms around. I'd almost say, what can't you do? It's pretty endless. So again, these are just approaches that you can take because I can get to that data via API both, and I can write to that data via APIs to Google and Excel. The sky's the limit, really. So you just really gotta, take advantage of what you have sitting in front of you. There's a lot of cool things to build.
yeah, no, exactly. So inside workflows, right, you'll see the Okta official templates inside the tool platform is, workloads itself. And again, these are just, community templates. So again, anyone can upload and share stuff.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll show that again. I talked about it already, but if you go into the templates and type in campaigns, you're going to see here, there's a 37 different flows related to campaigns. Soon, hopefully conditions will be up there as well. So yeah, just let us know too if there's anything else you're looking for, but we're trying to keep up with everybody and showcase some cool things.
Cool. Well, Christian, thank you so much. This was awesome. And again, we'll do the session on organizing. And again, we'll put it on that page that I shared. And then, folks, thank you for joining today. Thank you for all the questions. And then we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Cheers.